Hey folks, let me know if you can hear me and see me for that matter. We'll give a couple more minutes here, and then we can go ahead and get started. I hope everyone is enjoying their time at home, staying safe, staying healthy. I think my favorite, content around COVID-19 right now is the TikToks where it's just the woman recording people from like a balcony screaming at people to stay away from each other. That's been my personal favorite thus far. I also feel really old when I look at TikTok videos. Half of it's over my head. All right, so I think we can go ahead and get started. Kind of the forum is wide open today. Maybe some of you have been to Continuus Technologies data meetups. They're really free form kind of forums where you can really talk about or ask any questions that you want. I think the easiest way to do this for questions would be to put them in the live chat. Otherwise, I have some topics and questions that were submitted a little bit ahead of time, and I can go ahead and do some of those. I think that's probably the best way to go. So I'll give people a couple seconds to put it in the live chat. If you don't know how to kind of do that, it should be over in the right-hand side of your screen. You can go ahead and ask questions there. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and get started on some of these other questions. Also, if you hear wild animals upstairs, it's my two children. It's weird. They're like quiet for like 40 minutes at a time, and then there's just like this fury of activity. They're kind of like, if you have two cats, they're just like quiet for most of the day, and then they get in like a quick fight. Thoughts on the Johns Hopkins COVID-19 viz? I like it. It is it's a reputable source. The men and women that are behind it know what they're talking about. So I just recently posted something on LinkedIn about that, kind of my feelings about data visualization about COVID-19. And broad strokes, I have a lot of trouble with people posting visualizations that either like posting them publicly. Like it's one thing to have conversation internally with a couple of folks, but posting public visualizations and you have no idea sort of like of the public, or you have no background in public health or epidemiology, I think can be really dangerous. But when a visualization is coming from an official source, I think that is way better, right? So like the idea is that at the very least they can back up their methods and the data that sits behind that viz. But the other piece of it, and I think it's critical, is that the visualization really needs to be actionable. It should be telling you something about, the spread of the virus, the threats to individual communities. One piece that I think has been really missing is just some really actionable information about, if you get tested, who should get tested, where to go to get tested. Some actionable insight, I think, is really good. And I think that Johns Hopkins kind of hits on both of those. So I like that viz. think it's good. Someone asked me about like what are the, and like there's also a bunch of stuff about sort of data science kind of helping and solving for COVID-19. I think it's the same message that I have whenever anyone asks about how data science can help solve. I think it's part of a solution. It's not the solution. I think humans are probably the first, human behavior and kind of the way that we operationally and procedurally deal with issues is the number one thing. And then data science is a piece of that. It's not a silver bullet. It'll never be. Shouldn't be, at least. Well, I can go ahead and start answering some of these other ones. And then if you all have questions along the way or have comments or want follow-up, go ahead and put those in the chat. So the first one that I have on here is my boss keeps talking about ML, AI, etc. What are some things that I can do in the near term to get quick wins with my boss, even if our data is not yet ready to handle something like ML? I think there's a lot of folks in that situation. And I think what I want to do is talk about the data readiness piece first. So data readiness is not all created equal. So there's enterprise data readiness, and then there's data readiness for point solutions. And obviously, if you have data readiness for a point solution, that does not necessarily mean that you have data readiness across your organization to do like broad strokes data initiative or data science initiatives. But data readiness for a particular solution to maybe answer a particular question or set of questions that's smaller, I think is actually readily attainable. So it's really actually about, okay, well, do you have access to the correct data? So that's kind of like the threshold, right? So if you don't have access to data, you want to predict something, but you have no historical data to build something on, and no access to data that can act as a surrogate, you're kind of up a creek in that regard. But if you have access to that data, and the data is just really dirty, but you have the means and the time to kind of clean that data on your own to that one point. Again, this is not across your enterprise, but to answer that one question, I think that data readiness becomes a little bit of a moot topic. Now, if you're talking about industrializing that solution to support, business functions and processes, then, I think you need to be really thoughtful about how robust the pipeline is to your whatever initiative you have going. So like, I guess that's the first thing that I would tackle. But then in terms of quick wins, I think I said this in the talk that I gave last week, but like kind of focusing on high value add, right? So if I solve this problem with data science or with, a machine learning algorithm, it's a huge value add to our company. But if it doesn't work, it's not a huge risk, right? Like we're not losing a bunch of money. We're not, it's not politically a huge disaster. I think that's a good place to start. And that can be places like optimization engines, prioritization engines, or recommendation algorithms, things like that. I think that's a really good place to start. I think it also, to the point about like your boss, the other to like making your boss kind of happy. I think that's something that, they'll probably buy in on as well. But, I think the other piece is just making sure that the person that's asking for this has a full understanding, a full understanding of, what that means. Make sure that they understand the underpinnings and the things that you need to have, and the types of resources and, tools that you need to kind of build something that's meaningful in an organization. And then like also beyond your boss. So it shouldn't be just your boss. You should make sure that whatever you're going to build is aligned to business value. So doing something that makes an operational side of your business a little bit more efficient and no one really cares kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. If you build something that, drives value and saves a bunch of money, that's a little different. Next question was, what is the difference between data science, data analytics, and data engineering, and how do these fit with the avocado? That's a great question. So one of the things that I've talked to a couple people about is actually data engineering as being part of, or sort of baseline, right? So it's kind of this piece that is fundamental to all of the disciplines. So it's almost necessary, but not sufficient for every single one of the pieces of the data science avocado. It's almost, I don't know how to say that. It's almost like the canvas on which you paint the data science avocado. So that's my idea there, is that like it's fundamental to all of the things, including data analysis. So data analysis is kind of, in my opinion, it's almost like ad hoc analysis. So when I get a bunch of data, so let's take the COVID-19 data. If I want to make sense of that data, and for myself, it would be an analysis. I'm not trying to predict anything. I'm not building anything that's future facing, anything like that. It's really just like, okay, well, how many deaths are happening? Are there new? What is the threat to an individual community or my community? What about how many cases have been happening? All of that stuff is basically ad hoc. None of it is future oriented. Is going to be providing predictions or anything like that. It's just helping me get a better understanding of what the hell's going on. So that's kind of the way that I look at data analysis. And then, how that fits onto data science. Again, data science, I think, is more... And again, this is not just my idea. I've kind of taken this from a couple of folks. I don't think that data science is necessarily a precursor or distinctly different from a lot of things. I think it's the practice of a lot of techniques. So Jared Grant, who's on the Milwaukee Alteryx user group board with me, I think he uses the phrase, it's almost a trade. It's like electricians have all of these skills, but, not one single one of those skills is necessarily, not one of those skills makes up an electrician. So it's almost like this is a trade. Data science is a trade. I think that data analysis is one of those methods. You can analyze data, exploratory analysis, things like that. I don't think it's necessarily a discipline in and of itself. So that's kind of how I feel about that. We've been doing data analytics. This is the next question, by the way. We've been doing data analytics, but how do we know when we are ready to start data science projects? That's a really good question. I think it's really about the business questions and the value that you're going to be driving. So if your question is more about the readiness to do it from a talent perspective, I think that's one thing that we can tackle. If it's from like a data readiness or organizational readiness perspective, I think that's also another way to kind of look at this. So if we look at the talent perspective, I think having one of the paths that I talk a lot about is kind of having a really, really good foundation for data science. And I think one of the things that can provide that is really, really deep understanding of inferential statistics. I think that's a really good place to start. And you can kind of start to get into what I would consider statistics. That's kind of advanced analytics to me, again, my opinion. And then I think that that's a really good jumping off point, because a lot of those methods and the principles there inform predictive analytics and data science. So I would say if you have a lot of those things in place, from a talent perspective and from a true sort of like educational perspective. So, I don't think that necessarily you have to have a PhD. I think it helps oftentimes to have people who have spent, years kind of focusing on the quantitative side, but having a good, feeling comfortable, being really honest internally about sort of like your talent and your talent on your team. I think that that's a good place to start. And then, I think a lot of folks, if you're my age, I graduated college in 2005, went back and got a little bit more schooling. I'm 35 years old. I think a lot of us kind of started at and we kind of did this like tool belt approach to data science, where it was like individual problems kind of came up and we would go learn this type of model, or, oh, this didn't work. And we would kind of learn other sort of alternatives to a model, or, ways to tweak the data to, fix biases or any of those things. And so like, I've taken this kind of like, off the shelf, I like this approach to it. And I don't think that that's a bad way to skill up, but I think that it can be slow. It's not as efficient. Nowadays, I think that there can be really focused, like, hey, I really want to focus on healthcare analytics, or population health, or financial risk models, things like that. There are very sort of like targeted sets of data science, machine learning methods around those individual places, and you can kind of go and get those online. Coursera, I'm a huge advocate of. From an organizational readiness perspective, this is honestly going to come down to, and this is not a new thing, this is not a data science thing, this is going to come down to what I think of as kind of like executive championship. So if the people who are sitting at the very top see no value in the solutions that you're going to build, you're going to very rapidly sort of lose faith in a lot of people. So that's where I like to start. The organizational readiness is kind of teaching sometimes it's almost managing up and kind of being like, hey, I know the things that are driving you value, but have you thought about the fact that, we could save millions of dollars by just optimizing the list of people that our sales force calls every single day, by saying these are the people most likely to respond. Really kind of talking about the art of the possible, and then that kind of trickles down and gets you executive championship, I think can be really good. If you have executive championship and someone in the executive suite is saying, we need AI, we need ML, I think you're in a good place. And I think that can be, that in my opinion means that you're probably organizationally ready. And then to my point earlier about what about like data readiness and all that? Again, I think that that's less of an issue when it's a point solution. You're kind of testing the waters with data science. Like, I just kind of want to see what our capabilities are. Is our data, can we use this data to make sound predictions, something like that? Again, I think that you have a lot of, as an individual or as a team, as long as the data is there, there are a lot of tools that can help you get it into the right form. To build some models. What else do I have here? They want data science now. VPs want data science now, but we have other problems to deal with. How do we handle these conversations with higher ups and balance dealing with existing project needs and implementing / completing data science? So you have to keep the lights on to do your data science projects. I think we've had conversations like this at the data meetups that we have. One of the ways, so actually, let me start with this, right? So that is a very good place for you to kind of be a leader without being a leader, and explaining, hey, we have operational inefficiencies in projects, and we're spending a lot of time on processes or applications, or basically our focus is, on things that are not adding you value. And you're telling me that data science problems or using data science to fix this problem is of value add to you. Well, anytime that I'm spending on keeping the lights on, focusing on these things that arguably aren't adding value, is a distraction from that. So that's a really good way to kind of manage up and say, listen, everything, when you ask for one thing, it's a pie, right? So like it takes away time from my ability to execute on the data science piece. Now, the other side is, if you are passionate, I am not an advocate of anyone just blindly working extra hours. I don't think that that's helpful. I've always said that if you're working extra hours, it should be because you want to work extra hours, at least in a lot of time. There are certainly ebbs and flows there, but there's pieces of it that's just kind of passion, right? If you're really passionate about it, go and do a little bit of this on your own, right? Build some solutions on your own, take it on yourself, get in early, stay a little later. Again, only do it if it's something that you want to do. But I think that there's something to be said for that. I mean, when you're really sort of like focused and you really are excited about something, I think you'll be really surprised at how quickly time can fly by at work. Now, if it's something that you don't want to do, right? So, and people are just saying, we need this now. I think that that's an organizational readiness question, right? You know, is our organization truly bought in on data science, or did they all just attend the same Gartner call last week and heard everyone talking about AI and ML? So in that case, I guess I would pivot back to kind of the earlier response, which is, hey, listen, I can focus on this, but it's at the cost of, you know, the operational stuff. So either you hire someone to own some of the operational projects that I'm working on, or we're not going to do this data science stuff. I guess that's kind of my opinion about that piece. Can't hire an experienced data scientist to lead us, and all I know is SQL. How can I do data science if I've never used R or Python? So again, I think that there's more behind this than just what the question is, right? So the first thing is, I'll tackle technology, even though I think the technology should come last when you're thinking about data science. R and Python are not the only ways to do machine learning, right? There are definitely ways to kind of cut a lot of that custom development out, you know, notably Data Robot, but then also, you know, Azure machine learning. There's a lot of, I guess, platforms that kind of accelerate and are, you know, code free. For instance, Alteryx has some like machine learning capabilities. The consideration that I'll make there is that deep understanding of the underpinnings of what's going on. I think it can be relatively dangerous if you're just building models blindly with something that's going to build a model for you and you just throw that into production. I think, you know, getting an understanding of the underpinnings, again, that sort of like inferential statistics idea, I think is a good place to start. I think can be really, really helpful and a good first step. You've seen Gantt charts for like critical paths for projects. I think if I'm thinking of a critical path, if I don't have all of these skills and I can't hire someone to kind of like own data science, that's now a good time for you. If you have someone that's saying data science is a priority for us, it's going to drive a lot of value, that is a good chance for you to ask for resources to upskill yourself, right? So again, I don't think it's a great idea to just start banging out automated machine learning stuff if you don't understand what the hell's going on in the back end. So I think it's a really good chance for you to kind of go to your boss and say, hey, you want this? Well, like that skill level's up here and I'm right here and I know how to close this gap. And all it is, you know, a little bit of education. I'm willing to put in the time. Will you sort of own the tuition reimbursement? Or I think it's a good way for you to kind of say, hey, listen, I need to upskill. That's a great place to start. That's what I would do. But in terms of R and Python, I want to go back to that a little bit. If you are going to do custom development of models, I do think that that's kind of, that requires a decent amount of A, programming skills, and B, good understanding of the packages, of the language, and then, you know, a almost deeper understanding of what's going on in the back end. So that's one thing to consider there. The other thing to consider is which one of those you're going to choose. I think people have a lot of opinions about it. In my opinion, R is a much more pure play for data science development. Python is also, I mean, all the same capabilities in Python, except it can do more. So it's more of a programming language than it is R. And I'm sure I'm going to piss off a couple people by saying that, but I like both of them. I think R is just a little more focused. Python is a broader language and can accomplish a lot more, specifically within the data integration space. So that's kind of my opinion about those two platforms. Another thing that I'll say about technology in the machine learning space is I think that there's huge efficiencies to be gained in the data engineering. I think, writing, 175 lines of data integration code that is going to be hard for me to upskill a friend on, or a coworker. Hopefully your coworkers are your friends, but it's going to be difficult to do that versus I like, kind of either offing a lot of that data integration to data integration teams, either ones that are focused on data science or just generally sort of more IT focused integration groups that can build you good pipelines to your model. Or using something like an Alteryx. And it doesn't have to be Alteryx, but something where you can actually visually build that is a much more maintainable solution than is, in my opinion, a Python pipeline. Now, if you have the skills to deal with Python, go for it, right? And if you have a group of people, but if you're just an organization that is just starting with data science and you don't have a lot of people that understand Python, I think it can be helpful to do it with a little bit more of a easy to democratize data pipeline. But I'm always just a fan of whatever aligns with your organization's skill set. So got another question here. What are the best conceptual resources to start understanding the value of analytics? So I presume that's kind of like what understanding the conceptual resources, the value of analytics. Yeah. So I'm trying to think of places that I've heard a lot about the value of analytics. I guess I'm not sure what the resources are, but I don't have sort of one book that I've read or anything like that around it. It's more so kind of the way that I look at analytics. I think every single analytics problem that I've been faced with is helping people save money, or helping people make money. So that's either identifying new opportunities or finding inefficiencies within systems and driving actionable output or actionable insight, or driving action from the insight in your analysis. Now that's very broad strokes. Obviously, I started with money. That can be lives. That can be, the number of, I guess, people to be serviced or anything like that. But roughly that breaks down into dollars and cents. So that's kind of where I focus value. And I think it's really actually important. And I think that this question needs to come first. And this is with an ad hoc analysis all the way to, a deep learning algorithm that is, classifying defects in, tiny pictures of little, like in manufacturing, like it's identifying defects. Like, I think the first thing that you need to do is define the return on your investment for it, right? So that is a huge overlook when we talk about value of analytics. I think the hype cycle, we all got really excited and just started building analyses really quick. And the issue with that is I don't think a lot of focus was put on the value of those analyses. And if you really start to ask yourself, what is the value of building this dashboard that shows me the portfolio of products that we own and their performance? Now, that's probably what I think you'll find is that you build a whole heck of a lot less visualizations, a whole heck of a lot less metrics around things, because you're going to focus in on the things that drive value as sort of identified by the end users of that. So scattershot answer, I don't think I have any good like resources from like a literature or a group, but there are definitely purists out there about what the value of analytics is. And I would say some of the ones that I've specifically within the data visualization side seen, Stephen Few and Edward Tufte are kind of like purists. And I think that can be refreshing, but also kind of like they can be a little terse. So Jared responded, programming is necessary when doing something custom or innovative or advance or to advance the discipline. Otherwise, those are tools available to make it easy. That's a really good point, right? So like, I love that point. The idea being like, okay, well, you're not the first one to live. So don't recreate something that someone's already done, because not only has someone probably already done it, someone likely smarter than you has probably done it and optimized it with a group of people focused on that. So it's a great point. But if it isn't there and, you know, hey, I need to, something simple, like I had to build some SHA encryption algorithm the other day, and I could have done it with, you know, Alteryx, but it would have taken a whole bunch of tools, and there was already a Python package that had it built. So I went and I used that Python package, passed data to the Python package that encrypted it, pulled it out of the Python package, and then went forward. So that's a really good point. If things don't exist, that's where custom programming can come in place, and that's in reference to kind of R and Python and custom development. So another one. In a targeted or hybrid team structure, how can we get technically qualified employees to learn the business as fast as possible? I love this question. I think that this goes back to actually teaching value. So in my opinion, you know, you can really get to the heart of the operations and what's valuable in a business by simply asking that. What are the key value drivers to this line of business, right? So I'm sitting, you know, I'm a shared data science service. I have never worked with HR data in the past. The first thing that I'm going to ask that group is, all right, well, what drives value for you? And that they're going to have a lot of things to say. You can go in with hypotheses if you have a relatively sort of informed view of what they're doing, starting with, hey, here's what I think is driving value. Can you corroborate that? That's a really good jumping off point to understand that business. And that's a dedicated conversation, by the way. You can't just say, all right, we're going to spend an hour and upskill on an entire line of business. It's something that both sides have to be bought into, the data science side and the line of business. I mean, we're talking probably multiple meetings spanning a couple, maybe 3-4 hours of dedicated focus time. And the data science side is probably going to be more responsible as almost not interrogators, but interviewers. You're like really going in and trying to understand what's driving those the value. And really, if you understand what are the biggest value drivers to that line of business or to that function, everything else is kind of a distraction, honestly, as data scientists. Now, if you're focused on operationally making, you know, your call center more effective, yeah, cool. Maybe you need to focus there. But anything that's not core to what's driving value to those lines of business again, I think it's a distraction. I think that's a really good way to rapidly upskill, and not even upskill, just sort of get the business acumen up for an individual data scientist or data science group. So that's where I would start. And I think it's kind of the idea of you know, focusing in on what's going to get you the biggest bang for your buck. Let me look here. How can I explain what data science is and how it can help how it can help non-technical people. That's a good question. I guess if someone asked me that off the cuff, I think from a story perspective, I would take something like, again, I think that optimization engines everyone can understand. And maybe not optimization engines, but recommendation engines. I think that those are great just because we've all, whether we've known it or not, especially as a non-technical person, they've experienced the output of it. So if someone's watched Netflix, they've gotten recommendations from Netflix. If they've gone to Amazon, they've seen other people also bought these things. All of those are recommendation engines, or at least the output of a recommendation engine. And the value that they bring is they optimize, your shopping experience. Now, that's one way of putting it. Another way of putting it is it maximizes the dollar amount that you spend and the time that you spend on a platform. But if you just focus on the value that they're driving to that end user, I think that that's a really great way to start, right? So, hey, that's one example of data science, and really the value of it is it simplifies your work stream. That's one of the values, and I think that that's a very sort of easy thing for people to understand. I think it is a simple thing for even lay people to kind of understand. I think the one other question that I got the other day was around kind of when to automate and when to custom build machine learning. So AutoML is kind of like the idea behind like a data robot where you have a data set and you don't necessarily have the time or the resources to build 50 different models and figure out which is the best. So you kind of want to automate it. But when would you want to kind of do a more research-based approach to development of a model? And I think my response there is, if you are, it's about value drivers. I don't think that there is a particular problem that you should do one or the other. If there is a huge, so data robot obviously is a software cost to an organization, but so is custom development. So figuring out, okay, well, what is the estimate for custom development versus what is the overall cost of owning a platform that does this for me? So that's your overall dollar amount. And then what's the value add? Okay, well, this one, like if I automate it, it's going to come sooner. And so, is that worth it? Is that if there is a delta, like where, data robot may cost more or vice versa, is getting it to market going to make it delivery more valuable? I think that can be really helpful or a helpful way to look at it. So it's really sort of like the key drivers there are how much is it going to cost for both of them? Is speed to market important for me? If it is important to me, how important is it to me? And that can be a very easy way to kind of move quickly into or to back your way into whether I should automate or I should build custom. The other piece is, I guess it's still within the speed to market, but it's, it's almost the extensibility of that. So when you build something with a platform that you can push directly to an API, push your model directly to an API, then it's a lot easier for you to integrate that with your systems. That's all the questions that I had written down. I'm happy to take any more questions. And you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to see if we have any ones from our lean coffee. Let's see what we have in here. From past lean coffees that we've had. Close. Here's a good one. What are you doing to stay on top of new technology trends? What are you doing to stay on top of technology trends and sort of, it's not even technology, it's methods as well. I think a great place to start there is to get together with other like-minded data scientist group or data scientists. So I really like informal settings. I like, whether it's coffee, whether it's beer, it doesn't really matter, but getting together and kind of sharing war stories. Hey, I approach this problem this way. How would you approach it? And I think that that's a very disarming way to kind of talk about things that are really, really challenging. That's the easy, and 9 out of 10 times, someone's going to have, at the very least, an alternative opinion about how to go about something. So that's the way that I've always treated it, almost like crowdsourcing or, focusing on people that I respect in the data science field. I think the internet can be a very, very scary place to get data science questions answered, just because, people can be real jerks. But then also, it's really ambiguous. It's a hard place to kind of have natural conversations with like all of the kind of wrinkles that you need to kind of, oh, well, yeah, also, I forgot to tell you this. The data, only comes every month, stuff like that. I think it's a lot easier to have conversations, and it can be nice to have those conversations with people that you find, or your friends, basically. All right, so where did I get my shirt? I got it at J. Crew, Andy. Now leave me alone. Let's see. Grabbing some others from our data meetups. Alteryx to Tableau. Works great if Alteryx is pushing to Tableau. What about using it the other direction, Tableau to Alteryx? Run tool using tab command to use Tableau content in Alteryx. Thoughts? So you would use like something like an action to kick off tab command, or drive some action from Tableau to kick off like some sort of Alteryx workflow. Trying to think of like a good use case for that. I mean, like I don't, a batch file. Okay. I don't think it's a bad idea. I guess it's I like to think of, I guess when I first started with both of those platforms, Alteryx and Tableau, I thought of them as kind of like standalone solutions. And the more that I've gotten into enterprise deployments of not only Alteryx, but just data platforms in general, the more I see these as actually like part of an overall orchestration. So Alteryx does this piece, Tableau does this piece. And by the way, if it was an iceberg, Tableau, Power BI, Click, data visualization software is just the tip of the iceberg. And oftentimes, even though it's the last, I would say 5% of effort in terms of analysis, it's probably the only 5% that anyone that is a stakeholder cares about. So it's the most important, which can be frustrating as someone who sees the entire value chain. So like that's my idea there. I haven't seen it be done. I've seen Alteryx be part of like an enterprise scheduler, kicks off Alteryx, does something to Tableau, and then either kicks off something else after the Tableau or kicks off Alteryx again. So I've seen it done with like a bash file where you kick off Alteryx workflows, but I haven't seen Tableau directly sort of like kick off Alteryx. And maybe I'm missing the exact use case, but I haven't seen the very specific thing that I think that you're asking. I've definitely seen things kick off Alteryx workflows or refresh Tableau dashboards. How do you think AI ML and deep learning features in Tableau and other visualizations are impacting data science? And is it value to business? Are they dangerous? I'm not sure if they're dangerous. I know what you mean. I don't think that they're like bad. I mean, I guess it's kind of like it's almost like people won't even know what to do with them, in my opinion. So like, I get why it's happening from a market perspective, but oftentimes a lot of the people that are end users of the platforms are not going to understand how to effectively use those pieces. Now, from an overall capability standpoint, what's been interesting in the marketplace is to see what used to be these little microbrews where Alteryx does this, Tableau does this. What they've done is, instead of doubling down on their core functionality, they've started to build out new functionality. Tableau has Tableau Prep. Now they do predictive analytics. Now they're starting to do this. Alteryx did the same thing where they started building sort of models that, the machine learning piece, assisted modeling. They have Promote, they have Connect. They've sort of grown their footprints. That's been really interesting. So I think it's more so an attempt to kind of grab market than it is necessarily use case. I personally, if I was going to do ML, I would not be focusing on using a data visualization software to do that. I would probably be doing something else. Now, for light use cases, I think that it maybe makes sense. I don't think it's necessarily dangerous, but unless people are making like really important business decisions with like algorithms that are built in Tableau, but that's dangerous for about 50 other reasons. All right, finding a couple more questions here. There we go. All right. Ooh, I like this one. What is the best organizational structure for data science? So I kind of talked about this in that talk about kind of hub and spoke hybrid models. How do you kind of structure your data science group for the most value? There's a lot of different models here. There's a data science for every single line of business. There is a shared service data model or data science model where you have a core set of data scientists and, they're almost project-based, lent out, and they're almost an internal consulting group. And then you have kind of this hub and spoke model where you have that centralized data science group that's maybe a center of excellence. That's a true center of excellence. I think that that's gotten a bad name. The center of excellence has kind of got a bad name over the last year or so. That's not fair. Last 5 or 6 years as being kind of a buzzword, but it's a center of excellence that's truly sort of a governing body saying, these are the platforms that we're using. Here's how we're managing packages. Here's how we deploy things, all that kind of stuff. And then you have outside of that hub, then you have data scientists on each one of the teams that really build firm business acumen. I think that can be really, really good. So that's kind of my view. Like, I think that is the best way to go about it, is to have that hub and spoke model where you have a group that is focused on setting standards, setting governance, that responsible for really industrializing models. Maybe this is your machine learning engineering group, things like that. I like that organizational structure more than I like any of the others. How and when do you see products like Tableau being overutilized, as in Alteryx is a better choice for solving the problem? It's not necessarily overutilization. I think that folks, if you only have one tool, you end up using one tool. So like the old adage is, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So that's typically when I see it, when people are trying to overstretch it just because they only have the one platform. Now, where I do see, I think it's really important actually as an organization. So like overstretched depends on like what your organizational's intent with that technology was. So if you bought Tableau and said, Tableau is going to be, we're going to use Tableau Prep to do all integration between Excel documents on our network and to build those data sets, I don't think it's an overstretch of Tableau's skills at all, because you set that intent. Now, if you set that intent and then now you're also blending all of this governed data from your SQL Server data warehouse, then I think it's an overstretch, and you should probably have a data integration tool. But it's really about, kind of what your intent is for the platform at an organization, and are you within those? Which, I mean, I guess as an organization, you have to set those intents, which I think is important and a precursor to being able to evaluate that. But that's kind of my approach there. I don't see Tableau and Alteryx competing that much. I think that they are pure play, where self-service data visualization, self-service data preparation. So I don't see those overlapping too much. Where I see things overlapping is kind of, or maybe people are using the platform or overstretching it, is kind of actually once you get into predictive modeling. I think it can be really, you can get really quickly into and using platforms that are not geared towards that. That's probably more or a closer or a more frequent thing that I see. Do I have an opinion on Looker as a viz tool? I have not used Looker as a visualization tool. That is a shortfall on my behalf. I don't know if anybody on our team has, but I guess I don't have a great opinion about that. What I'll say, though, is, again, a data visualization tool, although it's the last 5% of your focus, is going to be the most important piece. So as long as it aligns with what your end users want, and it's easy for them to get access to, go for it. Another good one here. What's more important, academic experience or job experience? So I explained to you that I kind of have a combination of both of those. I went to school, but then also kind of took that kind of like off the shelf approach to building my skill set. I guess my opinion is I think it's extremely important, if you're going to be leading a team and guiding a team, to have some sort of formal understanding of, and when I say formal, I mean an academic understanding of, data science. I think that can be really, really helpful when you're kind of teaching folks, when you're going to be responsible for the skills and the upbringing and mentoring of junior data scientists. I think it can be really, really important. Now, if you're going to be kind of a lone wolf and you're going to be establishing a data science practice, I think that it can be really helpful to have that job experience, where you're just sort of like, I've seen that downfall before. We're not going to build, we're not going to build this that way, or we're not going to do this or that. It's just kind of a streetwise kind of approach to data science that I think is sometimes undervalued, especially by the academic side. And frankly, I think that both sides, if you ask an academic or you ask somebody in the private sector, each one of them is going to have a different answer. And I think my answer is, ¿por qué no los dos? Like, why can't we have both, right? I think, again, the job experience is going to give you the savviness and the wisdom to avoid the mistakes. Academics is going to give you the deep, deep underpinnings of the quantitative side to help you really, really thoughtfully grow a sound data science perspective from a quantitative perspective. We got about 7 minutes here. Let me look here. One of our data meetup questions. I just saw it. I just got to search for it here. About measurement. So are we focusing on the right things? So there's this, I worked with Robert Farley at Health Payment Systems before I came over to Continuus, and then Robert left and pushed over to another one of the consulting firms here. And we were in the middle of a call center metrics kind of analysis. And one of the things that he said that really stuck with me is, I've seen very few KPIs actually drive action. And so I think that to that end, that kind of always stuck with me. I think measuring things is really tempting to have 50,000 different KPIs, but which one of them are driving action? In data science, I think the cut on that is kind of like, okay, well, are we predicting the right things? If you predict the number, like if you're a marketing group and you're predicting the number of people that come to your website, is that really the metric that you want to be looking at? Or is the intent there, or is the sales department, how many people are putting things in your cart? Is that really the metric that you want to be like measuring? Maybe it's yes. And the reason it would be yes, you need to tell me how that actually drives key value to you. So the most important thing to you as a sales department is that people buy stuff. The most important thing to you as a marketing department is that they get there. So being really, really honest with yourself about what's driving value to your organization is going to be the best way to answer that type of question. But in my opinion, the fewer the metrics, the more focused you can get on your metrics, the better. Just from an overall ability to execute, it's going to be a lot easier if you focus in on a couple of metrics. 5065, that's where we live, 5065 Woodruff up here. So we got a new address panel, and I didn't want to get rid of that because that's like a classic Milwaukee County thing. So I'm not sure. I don't think we necessarily need to cover another one. I don't have anything that was sent over. I really appreciate everyone joining. I think this was fun. Hopefully my family didn't cause too much of a distraction. I didn't get too distracted. But I had a lot of fun. I'm really happy to do these. What I would really like to do is maybe have these with other folks sitting on here. So Jared, I really respect your opinions around data science. I have a number of other friends and colleagues in the space. I think it would be really fun to kind of almost shuffle this around and have some of our data science friends kind of take the floor and answer some questions as well. But in any case, hey, I really appreciate everyone joining. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. So it's J Heisler, JHEISLER at continuustechnologies.com. So it's CONTINUUS-technologies.com. Please reach out directly. I think we'll be sharing this video, or we'll have a recording of this video somewhere. So you'll have multiple ways to kind of reach out. Again, really appreciate everyone joining. Stay safe, wash your hands, stay at home, all that stuff. Great.